Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We do have language interpretation services available. For anybody that wants to listen in English or Spanish, you will need to click the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and then select your language of choice, either English or Spanish. And if you have questions, you can raise your virtual hand at the end of the presentation and we'll be able to address your questions in English or Spanish. With that, I'll turn it over to Adam.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to have that translated for anyone who wants to listen to this by Spanish?
Yeah, would it be possible, Teresa, or one of you to jump into the English channel and announce that? Okay.
Because the other interpreter is going to start interpreting, but I can let you.
You're off.
Okay, thanks. Buenas tardes a todos los participantes. Tenemos el servicio de interpretación. Si por favor los hispanoparlantes pueden hacerle clic en el canal de interpretación. Está en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Lo pueden ver por un globo. La señal del globo dice interpretación. Por favor, háganle clic para acceder al canal en español. Gracias.
Thank you, Teresa.
Okay. All right, I'm going to start. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so good evening. My name is Adam Peskowski. I'm a principal planner with the City of Morgan Hill with the Development Services Department. And first, I just want to apologize for anyone who tried to tune into us last week. We did have some technical difficulties on February 10th, and we plan to hold a town hall meeting about the housing element update on that date last week. But unfortunately, we had technical issues that we could not resolve at that time. I did, however, recorded a video that is posted to our housing element update website that took a more in-depth dive into what a housing element is and the components of affirmatively further and fair housing, as well as the housing needs assessment. And that recording is an abbreviated version of the presentation that I gave to the Planning Commission on January 25th that covered additional data, graphs, and tables. So today I'm going to provide a very brief background of what is a housing element. I'm going to touch on a few key housing element laws, briefly discuss the housing needs assessment, explain some steps for the housing element, and then open most of the time to hear your feedback about Morgan Hill's housing needs and any questions that you may have about the housing element. So a housing element is how a jurisdiction plans to meet the housing needs of everyone in the community. At its core, a housing element is an opportunity to have a community conversation about how to address local housing challenges and find solutions. The housing element is one important part of a city or county's general plan, which serves as the blueprint for how a city or county will grow and address changing needs for development. Every 8 years, every city, town, and county must update their housing element and have it certified by the California Department of Housing and Community Development. The 2003 to 2031 housing element must be approved by the city and submitted to HCD for approval prior to the certification deadline of January 31st, 2023. And just to abbreviate, so the HCD, that stands for the state. So the state must, Housing and Community Development Department, they must approve our our housing element. Sorry about that. So first, I just wanted to go into some of the key housing element laws. Some of these are more related to sites inventory, which I'll provide a much deeper dive into during the Planning Commission meeting on February 22nd. But first one on here is AB 215, and that extends the state's review of housing elements to 90 days, and then 6 days for any subsequent reviews. So this expands their review time and requires additional time, or it actually provides us less time to prepare our housing element. The next three laws that I have on here, AB 686, AB 1397, and SB 166, are all related to a site inventory. And as I mentioned already, we're going to provide a much deeper dive on those on February 22nd with the Planning Commission. But in summary, AB 686 states that all housing elements must include a program that promotes and firmly furthers fair housing and provides opportunities throughout the community. AB 1397 requires cities to zone their share of regional housing needs and requires by right development on identified sites. And this might make more sense if you attend the February 22nd meeting. SB 166 requires city to identify additional low-income housing sites in their housing element when market rate housing is developed on a site that's currently identified for low-income housing. And again, on those three laws, I'll go into much more detail at the February 22nd Planning Commission meeting. And then the last law on here is SB 375. And that states that if a city fails to adopt its housing element within 120 days of the due date, the city would be required to update its housing element every 4 years. And so that's just a brief summary. There's a lot more housing element laws that affects housing elements, but these are the top 5 key laws. So next, I just want to go over what are the components of a housing element. There are 6 key components to a housing element. The first one on here is the housing needs assessment. And this is really the census data. So it's providing a report that examines the demographic, employment, and housing trends and conditions that affect the housing needs of the community. The second bullet point is the evaluation of past performance. So we must review the prior housing element to measure progress in implementing the policy programs within that previous housing element. Third is the housing sites inventory. And this is usually a key point or a key step in the housing element, where we must identify locations of available sites for housing development or redevelopment to ensure that there is adequate capacity to address the regional housing needs allocation. The next one is community outreach and engagement. And this isn't really necessarily a step or a progress of how housing is done. The community outreach and engagement is an ongoing process. We have it throughout the entire housing element, but we do and will continue to have community outreach and engagement programs, and with a particular focus on outreach to traditionally underrepresented groups. And then the next one, the 5th one, is the constraints analysis. So we must analyze and recommend fixes for any existing and potential governmental as well as non-governmental barriers to housing development. And then usually the last step is policy programs. So based on all the information that we collected on all these other 5 points, we must establish policies and programs to fulfill the identified housing needs of Morgan Hill. So housing needs assessment, I'm going to provide a brief explanation of what that is and share some graphs and tables. So we do have a draft housing needs assessment report. It's posted on our website, within our housing element website, and I'll provide a link to that website at the end of our presentation. But some of the key figures that I want to share with you are in the next several slides. So the first one is population by race. So understand the racial makeup of a city or a region is important for designing and implementing effective housing policies and programs. And these patterns are shaped by both market factors and government actions, such as exclusionary zoning, discriminatory lending practices, and displacement that has occurred over time and continues to impact communities of color today. Since 2000, the percentage of residents in Morgan Hill identifying as white has decreased. And by the same token, the percentage of residents of all other races and ethnicities has increased by 14 percentage points. So next is the housing stock I want to touch on. In Morgan Hill, there are approximately 15,000 housing units, and fewer residents rent homes instead of owning them. So approximately 26% of residents rent versus 74% who own their homes in Morgan Hill. The housing stock of Morgan Hill in 2020 was made up of approximately 59% single-family detached homes, 18% single-family attached homes, about 5.5% multifamily homes with 2 to 4 units, and almost 10% multifamily homes with 5 or more units. And then the rest make up the mobile homes. So in Morgan Hill, as is shown on this table, the housing type that experienced the most growth between 2010 and 2020 was a single family home detached. And when you compare that to the multifamily homes, you can see that it's approximately 5 to 6 more times more single family homes, both detached and attached, were built compared to multifamily homes. So next I want to talk about workers and their earnings. So in Morgan Hill, there are approximately 22,000 employed residents, but only 18,000 jobs in Morgan Hill. So therefore, Morgan Hill is a net exporter of workers. This figure shows the balance when comparing jobs to workers, broken down by different wage groups. So this offers additional insight into how local dynamics, how our city dynamics work. So as shown on this graph, Morgan Hill has more low-wage jobs than low-wage residents. And when I talk about low wage on this graph, I'm talking about any jobs that pay less than $25,000. At the other end of the wage spectrum, the city has more high-wage residents than high-wage jobs, and that high wage is $75,000 or more. So as you can see in here, just to explain it a little bit more, this is the difference on how many jobs there are that for people who don't live here. So we are having people commute for these lower wage jobs to our city, and we're not providing the housing to meet those types of jobs. And then over here, this shows how many people make $75,000 or more in our city, but we only have this many jobs. So we have less than 5,000 jobs compared to almost 10,000 residents that earn that much money. So this shows that we're not providing enough housing for our lower incomes. And then we're having not enough jobs to help with people who make more than $75,000. So talking about wages, I just want to touch on what is affordable housing. So the levels of affordability are based upon area median income, which is calculated for each locality and household size. So within Santa Clara County, if you make up to $181,550 for a four-person household, you could qualify for affordable housing. So want to talk about the households by household income level. So despite the economic and job growth experienced throughout the region since 1990, the income gap has continued to widen. California is one of the most economically unequal states in the nation, and the Bay Area has the highest income inequality between high and low income households in the state. And if you recall in that last slide, I said that if you make approximately $155,000 for a four-person household, you could qualify for affordable income or affordable housing. I'm trying to get my mouse to work, but it's not moving. But I was trying to point out that on this table, you can see that the 55.2% on the left side for Morgan Hill, that's for anyone that makes greater than 100% of the area median income. So this shows that approximately half of our residents could qualify for affordable housing. That $155,000 income that I mentioned on the previous slide, that's not for anyone who makes less than 100% of area income. It's actually anyone who makes less than 120% area median income. So you can move that scale up a little bit higher, and it shows that it's probably more than half of our residents could qualify for affordable housing. So I just really want to summarize what we're talking about when we have a housing needs assessment, and really just to provide some context for a discussion tonight. We really want to open up the rest of the time to hear from you, and we'd like to hear your feedback or any questions that you may have about the housing movement. So on here, I just want to go over some next steps. So we are going to complete a final draft version of the housing needs assessment, and we plan to have that available next week. We are going to prepare a draft inventory of available sites, or other words called a site inventory. And we're going to have a planning commission on February 22nd to talk more about Morgan Hill's site inventory. We're going to have another meeting with the planning commission on March 8th. And that's to review the prior housing element. So we have two upcoming meetings, one on February 22nd, talking about sites inventory, and then one on March 8th to talk about the review of our prior housing or our current housing. And then we plan on having another planning commission meeting in late March or perhaps early April. And that's to talk more about affirmatively further and fair housing. And we're also going to have additional outreach regarding that as well. So we're going to continue outreach to our hard to reach segments of our community. And we are going to have another document that talks specifically about affirmatively further and fair housing. And we'll have an additional meeting. I know that may not make much sense now, or it's not clear. Just a second, I'm going to stop my video because I'm getting an error that my internet is a little unstable. But I also want to point out that we do have a housing element survey that's out now. It's been out for the past month and a half. We have it in English as well as in Spanish, and we plan to close that survey on March 1st. And we are going to have additional surveys out sometime in March. That's going to be both in English and Spanish, and that's going to be more focused on the affirmatively further and fair housing. On this screen, I also have my email address for anyone who wishes to contact me or has any questions about the housing element, or if you just want to provide feedback about the housing element, you can certainly email to me, or you can send a letter to City Hall. We also have a housing element update website. So that second bullet point down here, any information related to our housing element is going to be posted to that website. So any future meetings that we do have, it's going to be posted there, as well as any documents that we release. So our housing needs assessment, our draft version, as well as our final draft will be posted on this website. And then once we have a draft inventory, a sites inventory, or a draft review of our prior housing element, it would also be posted on this website. This last bullet point is another website. It's Let's Talk Housing SCC.org. And so that's for Let's Talk Housing Santa Clara County. And that's more of a regional website. It's a collaborative that we have with all the cities as well as Santa Clara County to provide a one-stop shop type of website for all housing element issues that are going along with the entire county. So there's going to be information posted there as well about affirmatively further and fair housing. That's pretty much where we're going to focus on next in March. So there'll be much more information about that portion of the housing element. But as I mentioned, if I can get to the next slide, there we go. We want to open up the rest of the time for your feedback and any questions and answer sessions. And I just have up here just a few sample questions, things that we are interested in hearing about now. So some sample questions that we have is, what types of housing would be a good addition to Morgan Hill? What are our key housing needs or challenges? And what ideas do you have to meet our housing needs? And another idea could be what housing priorities are most important to Morgan Hill, or what housing priorities are most important to you? You don't have to provide answers to these specific questions. We really just want to hear what is important about housing to you. And these questions listed on here are just meant to assist and start in a dialogue with our community. So with that, concludes my presentation, and we'll open it up for any questions that you may have or any feedback that you may have. Thank you.
You do have two questions in the Q&A box if you want to start with those.
Okay. So I see one question stating less than $10,000 per year. That's got to include part-timers, high school students, was age considered in this study. And so that was information collected from the census, so it didn't include age for that portion. But that's not necessarily just for part-timers or high school students. That's anyone who earns that wage. I'm not sure if Christy or if Rebecca, if you have more information about income within that category. But they're within that $10,000 per year, that would be someone who, what we call extremely low income. So that's anyone who makes less than 30% of our area median income. I see that Rebecca unmuted herself, so I'll see if you have anything.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in and give some examples of what's of the different income categories that we follow under the state. So I'm just going to talk about a one-person household. And good evening, my name is Rebecca Garcia, Housing Director for the city. Thank you for those of you who joined us. So according to the state, in our county, because we're such a high cost area, if you're one person, acute low would be about $15,900 a year for your annual income. Extremely low income would be about $34,800 a year for one person. Very low income would be considered about $58,000 a year. And low income would be considered about $82,450 a year. Median income would be about $105,900, and moderate income would be about $127,100. That is just for a one-person household. Those numbers all change. For example, if it's a four-person household, an extremely low-income unit is about $49,700 a year of annual income. And moderate income household for a family of four is about $181,550. So that just kind of gives you a range of the different income categories that we try to target. I think the message there is there's a whole lot of people in our community, in our entire county, that really do fall into these different categories.
Hey, Rebecca, can I add to, I would say that folks on fixed income, like Social Security, folks with disabilities, those folks land in this category as well.
Okay, the next question I see is, what is being done to help people afford to own their place instead of renting?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Christine. So the city by policy has an inclusionary housing ordinance. Let me back up and say, actually, the city of Morgan Hill for about 40 years had the residential development control system, which was a pacing program to pace the amount of housing that was built by voter initiative. Part of that entire program for the past 40 years included affordability. So developers were incentivized to create affordable rental and ownership units. So the majority of the housing stock in Morgan Hill actually does have affordable units sprinkled in almost all developments. Fast forward to today, and we know, or we currently do not have the pacing program anymore. It's put on hold per state legislation. But what we did enact as soon as that happened was an inclusionary housing ordinance policy, which requires that developers set aside 15% of their units to be affordable. If it's outside of the downtown, and if it's inside of the downtown, 10% of the units are required to be affordable. That is true for both ownership and rental units. So we do acquire ownership opportunities through that program. That entire program is administered through a company called House Keys. They have a website, housekeys.org, with a lot more information. We're happy to type that in the chat. So that is currently what we do to obtain some ownership units. It's certainly not enough, and I wish we could do more, but that's as much as we can require at this time. And then I will also mention the Housing Trust of Silicon Valley has down payment assistance programs to help both lower and moderate income families with pretty significant size down payment assistance. And we'll type that into the chat as well.
Okay, the next question is, how are the sites inventory compiled? The Sites inventory is a really long and complicated response, and we will get into more detail on that on the February 22nd Planning Commission meeting at 7 p.m. But essentially, the short answer is that we first with us look at how many projects do we have in the pipeline. So how many projects do we already have entitled or are proposed? And then once we figure that out, we figure out what's the remaining number of units that we need in order to meet our RHNA numbers, so our regional housing needs allocation. And so if there's more housing units that's needed, then we need to go out and find parcels or property out in the city and identify which ones can be developed residentially or possibly developed with residential, and determine how many housing units we can fit on those properties and at what income category. So that's the short answer. We'll get into a lot more depth at the February 22nd meeting. I encourage everyone to attend that meeting who has any questions about sites inventories. We're going to take one more question from the chat because I noticed that there's a hand raised. So the next question in the Q&A is universal design being considered for people to age in place? And it is being considered, but we are also wanting to hear from the public to hear what are those key issues, what are the key policies or priorities that are in Morgan Hill that we must or that we should achieve. And so if there's anything such as universal design for people to age in place, if that's a top priority, we'll definitely have it on our list. We have it noted here for tonight. So we'll include that as part of one of our comments from the public. And so I also want to mention in our survey that we have out now, there are a number of different priorities that are listed as options to select within the survey. And so when we close that survey, we're going to evaluate that as well and see what are our top key priorities within Morgan Hill and what should we really concentrate on. If it comes out to where all those priorities are equally the same, then we would definitely focus on all of them. But if there's some that are that have a much higher weight to them, we may have some additional policies for those as well. So with that, I would like to go to the hand that's raised, since I think at that time it's appropriate to go to them.
Okay. Matthew Reed.
Yes, good evening. Matthew Reed from Silicon Valley at Home. I really appreciate the open discussion and all the work that you all have been doing. I'll try not to dominate because the Q&As are a little more succinct. But you know, Morgan Hill has really been a leader in the county at doing a tremendous job of you know, supporting and entitling affordable housing projects in the city. And I think your staff deserves commendation for that. And I just want to say that out loud in this space. And widely understood. I think everybody in the county knows the important work that you all are doing. As you're also aware, and I'm sure everybody's aware, that the needs are so great, it's very difficult to do enough. We, just because this process is happening in different time frames in different places, and we are a countywide organization, we were involved in a couple of meetings over a couple of sessions in Morgan Hill and in Gilroy, and working with some of your folks that do service delivery for specific populations and some community advocates. We submitted a letter to staff with some concrete ideas. I'll just refer to that. I'll mention a couple in a second, but we also asked for a follow-up discussion if that was possible. We really felt like that was an effort to respond to some of the challenges of affirmatively furthering fair housing that went beyond just the sites inventory to looking at ways of really opening up opportunity in a city like Morgan Hill. Some of the specific ideas that came up, and I'll start with the broadest one, was that through these discussions, people said, you know, we're doing a great job, but there's still a tremendous amount of fear and uncertainty and lack of understanding about what affordable housing is, what some of the challenges that people face are, how people end up unhoused in our communities. One of the ideas that Housing and Community Development had come up with was a series of just discussions to increase understandings across groups and populations that would ideally, make it easier for elected officials and for citizens to engage constructively in a collective effort of mutual understanding that would strengthen our ability to respond. That was just overwhelmingly, it came up meeting after meeting. And so I would just recommend that as something to think about, and we'd love to talk to you more about how to support that as a really constructive process. There was discussion also, I know the sites is coming, and frankly, you all are probably way ahead on the sites and the plan development. But another thing that was very clear is that cities like Morgan Hill have a tremendous, a lot of Morgan Hill is backyards. I don't know how to say that more succinctly, and that through accessory dwelling units and under new laws under SB 9, there may be opportunities to create affordable options that are very light increases in density that would allow homeowners to engage in helping to find solutions. There are some programs that are functioning countywide, some effectively, some less effectively, but this would be another area in which the city could invest in really spreading opportunities throughout the neighborhoods and communities of Morgan Hill. Finally, we're also involved in other discussions with aging adult groups and groups that look specifically at housing needs of people with different types of disabilities and accessibilities. This question came up. We'll be sharing another letter, difficult again, countywide discussion for each city, but we've been working with a group and we'll be sharing a letter. And some of the ideas there are tied to supporting lower income homeowners who are struggling to maintain their homes because they're on fixed incomes. Others are trying to be proactive about ways of integrating supportive services into senior affordable housing projects. This is an ongoing sort of emerging challenge and place that we thought that the city could really be creative. The question of ADUs came up in that discussion as well. So we'll be sharing that letter, but if possible, it really would be great to have an opportunity to sit down, even if it's for a relatively short meeting, to talk through some of the ideas that came out of these community meetings. I know it's very difficult to get to everybody. Appreciate that you're holding this space. We tried to create space for some of those discussions and would love to share that with you. So thank you for your patience with my long rambling comment.
No, not rambling at all. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we would love to meet with you. I know you spend a lot of time researching all of this, so we are all ears. We can definitely set up a separate meeting and take a deeper dive for sure.
Okay, our next speaker will be Fran White.
Hi, thank you. I'm simply someone who has a home in Morgan Hill, and I am probably one of those people that Matthew referenced who wants to learn more, have a lot of concerns and questions, but I'm open to learning. I love the ADU idea. I just think some way of being flexible enough to be able to do these small scale projects or tiny houses in people's backyards could really work. I guess Brian partially answered the question I put in the chat. So I noticed the housing element doesn't list rental apartments, and I know we're building apartments that are low income. My real question is the expectation of the housing element that people who are very low income or extremely low income or low income will actually become homeowners rather than renters? because it seems significant to me that apartments are not part of the housing element. And I'll wait for the answer. Thank you.
So I'll respond. So the housing element doesn't exclude any type of housing. So it would include rental apartments. The slides that I shared tonight were really focused, and there was only a few data that was shared tonight. We do have a whole document that's called the Housing Needs Assessment, and it provides a lot of information, a lot of census information about all different types of housing, all different types of income. I really encourage you to take a look at that document. But to answer your question, the housing element looks at all types of housing and also policies. So not necessarily housing, but other issues that we should solve in Morgan Hill, or that we strive to solve for. So the housing element encourages all type of development. It could be owner occupied, larger homes for your market rate, down to apartments, and as well as assisting the homeless as well. So it covers all aspects. If there's anything else that Rebecca or Christy that you want to add, please.
I think you covered it, Adam. I would just add to the question of, is the goal to get people into home ownership? I think it really depends on each individual's circumstance. Home ownership is wonderful, but I think we are at a natural point where we have to reevaluate how many people can afford that in our community. And we're pretty heavy on the single family housing side right now. So creating opportunities for people at all of the different various economic levels will make for a healthier ecosystem. So as much as I would love for everybody to have the home ownership opportunity, I think we have to take a look at realistically what folks can afford based on the incomes that exist. But certainly to the extent that we can bring in partners like the Housing Trust to host down payment assistance events, to let folks know of what resources are out there, we absolutely want to partner as much as possible and bring those resources into our community. But housing is really a spectrum, right? You live in a single family home for a long time. Kids move away. Sometimes you downsize and then you need a smaller place. Single folks might need less space. So I think the idea is to have a housing conversation that accommodates everyone in the community of all different economic backgrounds and family sizes. That's a long-winded answer. I hope that helps.
And one of my teammates, Christy, pointed out to me that on my table, we had it listed as multifamily. And for us in planning, multifamily could include, or does include, apartments. So it includes rental apartments as well. So if you see that term multifamily, it also means rental apartments.
Thank you. Christine Fitzgerald.
Hi, thank you very much. This is a lot easier rather than trying to type. Having to listen to what I'm doing while I'm doing it is hard. So I have a couple of comment / questions, and I'll try to make everything quick. I'm very concerned about a couple of things. That it was mentioned that perhaps home ownership is not necessarily the best way to go. That is true for many people. However, it should not be exclusionary to anyone. And if we're being honest with each other, in the long run, you're earning income from your home rather than just paying out money and not seeing it come back in equity. So that's one thing. Another thing, looking at the different models of homes and styles of unit offerings, single family, multiple family, individual, rental, purchased. One area hasn't really been touched on, and I really like to have Morgan Hill and all of the cities consider this as well, looking at folks that have disabilities where they may need a live-in attendant, and having something more than just a single bedroom where, say, an attendant would live on site, however, not in a proper room. This is not okay. We need to make sure that the attendants have proper rooms, but that the unit is affordable to the individual renting it and or buying it. So I'd like to suggest that a new housing model be considered. I'm not sure what to call it. You know, 1 bedroom plus, 1 bedroom plus ADU. But really, we need to look at that. And one other thing, and then I will shut up for now. And that is, given that Morgan Hill is South County, not all buses run that direction to and from, that is, to downtown proper. We need to also consider helping expand transportation options, because as pardon me, as has been noted, many folks who are very low income and severely low income live in Morgan Hill, but come over the hill, if you will, for their jobs. And predominantly, many of these folks are people of color who are working for low income, pardon me, for low wages, and are working their rear ends off to make ends meet, helping their family in whatever way they can. So I think we need to also look at transportation options that would help and benefit them. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Matthew, your hand is up again. Do you have another question?
I don't, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Just wanted to make sure. Adam, Rebecca, if you guys would like, we have a few more questions in the Q&A.
Sure. So we'll respond to the rest of the questions in Q&A. So we have a question here. What are you doing about bringing higher paying jobs to Morgan Hill? I don't have anyone from our economic development department here today, but we are.
Adam, I can jump in on
Sure.
on that one. So we have a very strong economic development agenda grounded really by the economic blueprint, and we'll type that in the chat. We have 500,000 square feet of speculative building under construction for new companies, and an additional 500 square feet approved. We're bringing an industrial preservation policy to the City Council in March. Date to be determined, to further align our goals to get good jobs. So the economic blueprint is our blueprint to how we achieve that question. And lots of energy and work goes into that. That's Matt Mayhood is our economic development director, and Edith Ramirez, our assistant city manager of development services, can speak to that even more so. And I'm happy to type their info in the chat as well.
Well, we don't have the chat on for this, but if you want to email that to me, I can type the answer to put that information as an answer to a question in the Q&A so folks can see it.
Perfect.
Okay, the next comment in the Q&A is, income is for a household when more than one individual lives in the household. That sorry, I'm just reading it again to make sure I understood it. Yes, that's correct. So income, so household income is for regardless how many people live in a household. That's all their combined income together. So I believe if that's not your question, or your question, please raise your hand and we can respond to that, or you can clarify what your question is. The next question is, are towns essentially required to develop all vacant land? Are towns with no vacant land given exemptions from the allocations? So the short answer is no. Towns are not required to develop all vacant land. cities are required to plan for housing based on the number of units that they're assigned from the state, as well as from ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments. So we could have, depending on what the number is and how the site inventory goes, or the whole entire process is conducted, most cities, they would identify vacant land that could be built on, but most of the time a city will not select all their vacant land. They're just going to pick the amount of land that's needed in order to meet that number, or the number of housing units that must be built. And for cities that don't have any vacant land, they would still get an allocation from the state on how many units that they have to build. And if they don't have any vacant land, they would have to identify non-vacant land, so land that's already built on, and either rezone that property to residential or allow more intensified development, so allow more dwelling units than that's currently allowed on the property. So there's a number of different ways that they can go about achieving that. There's also the possibility of annexing land to a city in order to meet their housing numbers that they were assigned. The next question is, a 4-person family considered kids and not working adults, and this would change how much people can put towards renting and owning. So yes, a 4-person family could include kids. It's just based on their dependents. So whoever their dependents is, that's considered wherever whatever number it is. It could be 2, 3, it could be 8. Just whoever is the dependents for the household. And then the next question I see in the Q&A is, one of the issues is proximity of housing near the freeway, as most of our traffic increase has happened on back roads as a result of most residents living here and not working here. Why not try to take a 2-pronged approach, increase jobs here and housing near the freeway? So as part of the site's inventory, let me back up. As part of the regional housing need assessment, or allocation rather, that was assigned to all the cities within the Bay Area, those numbers that we receive, and we'll get more detail into this when we talk about the site's inventory with the Planning Commission on Tuesday. But the way how the numbers were broken up between all the cities, actually, let me take a step back. The state gives a general number to the entire Bay Area, and then the Association of Bay Area Governments assigns a number to each city and the counties. And when we go through that process, the ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, they came up with a methodology to determine how many units should each city receive. And so that methodology was based on a number of factors. One of them is public transportation, number of jobs that are in the city. So some cities receive very high numbers, and then over 3,000 units, and then other cities, of course, receive less because we don't have, like for Morgan Hill, we don't have as many jobs as we do to the north in the North County. I see that Jennifer unmute herself. To add.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. I sat as an alternate on the methodology committee with ABAG, and that methodology is a formula that is developed, and it's based on different factors, just like what Adam said. The selected formula or methodology that was chosen during this cycle focused on the location of jobs and the location of transit. So if we had no methodology and the overall number for the Association of Bay Area Governments was split equally based on population or land size, our number would have been significantly higher, double or even triple what our RHNA allocation is, which is 1037 for next cycle. But because of those factors, it was actually reduced quite a bit because we don't have the transit and we don't have the jobs in the city. So I just want to give that little clarification. Like Adam said, at the planning commission meeting and the discussions about the site inventory, we'll be able to dig a little bit deeper on that topic. And if you have any more questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
So right now, I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A, and I don't see anyone. Sorry, the question just popped up for Jennifer in the Q&A. And then I don't see anyone else's hand raised, but I do see a call-in number. And if Michelle, if you don't mind just mentioning how anyone who called in, how they could raise their hand.
If you're calling in, you can dial *9 to raise your hand.
So if there's any other questions, or if anyone would like to provide any type of feedback, just to help spark some additional conversations, some questions that we're interested in hearing is what housing priorities are most important to you? What type of housing units would be a good addition to Morgan Hill? Or even perhaps what are the key housing needs or even key housing challenges that you see in Morgan Hill? What are we doing good? What are we not doing well? What's something that we could do more of? Like, is there certain types of housing units that we could, or that we should be building in Morgan Hill? That's all type of feedback that we're looking for. Again, we just want to leave this wide open and hear from anyone who has any comments or wants to share any information or really help us focus on what's the key issues to you and that needs to be solved for in Morgan Hill. So I do see another hand that's raised.
Sally Casas?
Yes, my name is Sally. I missed the beginning of the presentation, so thank you for reiterating the topics and key points. I always wondered, and I don't know if anybody else brought this up, but there are a lot of single people and some people that commute to come into town to work. And I'm wondering if there's ever been an encouragement about building studio housing. That's my question.
I guess, Rebecca, if you would have do you have a response to that? If there's.
We have some really cool single room occupancy units. I do not believe we have enough. I think that's what we want to hear from you all this evening. So thank you for bringing up the point. We will certainly make a note of that. I mean, it's very fair and plain to say there are certainly not enough of those types of units anywhere. So I'm not surprised that you would like to see more, and we'll make a note of that. I don't have the number off the top of my head of how many exist in Morgan Hill, but it's a handful. It's just a handful.
We have another hand up,
Yes.
Fran.
Yeah, getting back to the, how can we do something quickly? How can people, I mean, my sense of building an ADU, I know the laws have loosened considerably, but the thought of having to go down to planning and, go through some arduous process just intimidates me. And I think that if there was some kind of, maybe it's on your zoning site. I mean, I've looked at the regs and frankly, some kind of short, could people put tiny houses in their backyard if they wanted to generate rental income, help house people? Is that easy to do right now in Morgan Hill?
Well, the state has made it easier, where there's reduced setbacks. There's where we have to allow certain size units based on how many bedrooms. So it is an easier process than it has been 3 years ago, but it really depends on the property. I know that the costs are usually higher than what a homeowner or someone who's looking to build an ADU on their property. The cost is usually higher than what is expected. But there are a number of different organizations that have different calculators for ADUs. We're looking at a collaborative with the entire county to see what we can develop for property owners, to see what they could do with their property. And also in Morgan Hill, we have a small team of us that's looking into providing a better handout for ADUs. So that's something that planning and housing, our departments are working together with, as well as with the building department.
Yeah,
But we're not-
we agree that we need some kind of user-friendly, easy educational tools to help folks understand step 1, step 2. So we're definitely working on that.
And one thing that we're seeing is the legislature is updating rules and regs every year with new pieces of legislation to encourage that type of housing, actually all types of housing. So once, and this is standard for every city, once we have something in place, the rules are going to change a little bit. And so everyone plays catch up. And so, hang in there with us. We're going to get something. We do have some handouts right now that speak very plainly about how to get an ADU onto your lot and the best way to go about that. And those are available via the website. I don't know if we could post the address for that page. But we are looking at trying to streamline and almost automate that process a little bit more so it's easier for our residents.
Right, with one more hand up, Adam, and then we can take the other Q&A. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay, we have Joe.
The question is a tiny home automatically considered an ADU?
That is a great question. I'm going to let Adam and Jen take that one.
I guess the key question is, it depends. It's, but it could be. It depends on the size. There's a legal requirement or building requirement for the size of a ADU or for a home within California, and it must have a kitchen and a bathroom as well. But as long as you can build that structure or have that structure on the property and meet the setbacks as required under the new state laws, it's possible. But again, it'll need to be evaluated site specific as well.
Another hand up, Christine.
Doesn't that also depend on such things as insulation, etc.? Because an ADU, pardon me, a tiny home doesn't really have a lot in the way of insulation, etc. So I was just curious how that could be.
So I think you're getting more into the construction, and I don't think anyone that's here tonight from the city can really answer that type of question. Might be a building question or even a question for a contractor. I apologize, but I don't think any of us are able to answer that question tonight.
But we will definitely take it and come back with clearly we need a fact sheet. And thank you for those questions. What we're seeing as part of the tiny home movement for housing our unhoused residents, those are usually structures that are completed by or permitted by HCD. And so the regulations are a little bit different. But like Adam said, we probably shouldn't get into the construction details without our representatives from our building department with us tonight.
So I'm going to go to the Q&A. So it's more of a comment in the Q&A, and I'm just going to read it just so that everyone's aware of the comment that's made. It states that the population we work with are seniors and the disabled who are on Social Security, averaging $900 to $1,100 per month. And this is a community that could also benefit from the attention to their needs. So thank you for that comment. We'll go to the next hand that's raised.
Harry?
Yeah, you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Harry, go ahead.
Is there a website that will allow us to see what the planned developments are in the pipeline currently in the city?
Right now there isn't, but next week there will be. So if you go to our housing element webpage, we'll have that posted next week. We're going to talk more in depth about that on Tuesday with the Planning Commission. So on February 22nd, we'll have more information. So I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A, and I don't see anyone else's hand raised, and we are running out of time, but if anyone has a question, just please post it to the Q&A, or if you have a question, you can raise your hand. So we'll just wait a few seconds just to see if anyone has any other additional comments. I do see a question in the chat just asking me to share. Sorry, I just lost it. I think it was just asking for me to share my email.
And Michelle
it in there.
answered it.
Okay, thank you.
And Adam, maybe I misunderstood the question. Was he asking for development projects update?
It's kind of it was asking about or how I understood the question was if we have information to share what projects we have in the pipeline.
Oh.
So we will be having the meeting on February 22nd to talk about the site's inventory, and we will share information or a list of information about projects that are currently entitled and proposed, or these are residential projects that are currently entitled and proposed that we can count towards our RHNA number. And again, RHNA stands for the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. So that 1,000, I don't think we mentioned it exactly today in one of the slides, but the number of housing units that we have been assigned is 1,037 units. Jennifer mentioned that, but just repeating that information, but since it wasn't stated in one of our slides.
I was just
So I'm
thinking
not seeing
development projects, the significant projects update website might be a good one for them to have. I'll send that to Michelle.
Thank you.
And what Rebecca's referring to is we have a main page off the home page of our website that has project pages for all of our major development projects. All of those pages have opportunities to click for notification via email for public meetings and other documentation regarding those projects. There's also a slideshow on that page, and that's the significant projects presentation that she was referring to.
Thanks, Jen.
So I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A, and I don't see anyone else with their hand raised. So I just want to thank everyone for their time tonight. Thank you for all the questions. It was great. Anyone who has any questions or wants to submit any comments in the future, you can definitely email it to me. I'm going to share my screen again and share my contact information. So in here we have, here's my email address on the bottom. We have the city's housing element update website. And if you haven't taken the survey yet, please use these QR codes for English or in Spanish and help us build our housing element, help us develop policies and programs that we can include within our housing element and help guide the next 8 years of housing within Morgan Hill.
Thank you all very much for attending.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the time tonight.